Hey everyone, I've got another build log here for you today. Now this build log is going to be nowhere near as big as the Singularity Beast 2 build log that I've done recently, but it is a water cooling build log and it does involve a lot of work. Now you can see the Corsair Obsidian 800D here. Some of my subscribers, this is going to bring tears to your eyes because this is actually the case from the Singularity Beast. The old Singularity Beast that I've pulled apart. You can see that the case is just about empty. Now the build that you can see in the background, that's the Singularity half-X build. And what I'm going to be doing for this build log is pulling apart, stripping the half-X build and getting some of the parts out of it. I need the motherboard, the CPU and the pump, and I'm going to be moving those across to the Corsair Obsidian 800D and then rebuilding it. So I'm going to be doing this in my relaxed build log style, and I'm going to be getting Matt to help me out. Some of my subscribers will know Matt because this build is actually for him. And something else that's pretty exciting, I know a lot of you have been wanting to see me finish off my water cooling tutorial. Well, that's going to be happening soon. When I rebuild the half-X build in the background, I'm going to be doing a water cooling tutorial. Okay, so this build log will involve stripping the half-X, building the Obsidian 800D systems, and then I will have a water cooling tutorial to follow pretty soon. So I've got some of the parts laid out here. These have come out of the Singularity Beast, and basically the Singularity Beast was my old primary system. The Singularity Beast 2 is my new primary system. I've just finished building it. I'll put a link on the screen to the build log, the Singularity Beast 2 build log. It's a massive build log for an epic system. So yeah, it'll be really worth checking that out if you haven't done that yet. But yeah, basically I've just finished stripping a system, my old primary system, out of this case, and I'm doing a huge change around. You know, I've had some of the parts come out of this to go into my new system, and now I've got parts coming out of this system here to go into this system. So a lot of work going on at the moment, but these fittings I'll be using for the build. Probably this will not be enough because it's going to be quite a serious system. I've got stuff everywhere. As I've said, this is in a relaxed style. So this is the memory that I'll be using, Corsair Dominator GT, and it's a 12 gig kit, 2000 megahertz. It's got a EK nickel plexi water block on the top of it. So triple channel DDR3. The motherboard will be the Rampage 2 Extreme, so quite an old motherboard, and also an old CPU. I'm going to be using a Core i7 920, and it's the CO stepping 920. It's actually the original 920 that I bought way back when it first came out. It's also the original 1366 motherboard that I got back around the same time. And yeah, so that covers the motherboard, CPU and memory. But anyway, you can see I've started doing a bit of the wiring here. So I'm using a Silverstone Strider 1500 watt power supply because this is going to have Tri-SLI GTX 480s. Yeah, I've got a Bits Power LED station here, Bits Power X station here, so there's going to be a fair bit of lighting in the build. It's going to be a nice looking build, something quite similar to how the Singularity Beast looked. I'll put a link on the screen to the build that used to be in this case as well, so you can have a good look at that. So I've still got the radiator mounted on the back with a coolant's adjustable radiator mount here. So I'm changing around the tubing from what was in the Singularity Beast, the original system. I'm using Tygon tubing. It's all going to be 1/2 inch tubing. So the fittings, they're all Bits Power black sparkle fittings, by the way, and all compression fittings. I've got an assortment of 45 degree, 90 degree, single rotary, dual rotary. I'm using Coolant's quick disconnects. These are VL3 ends. I'll have some VL4 ends throughout the system as well. Dust filters here on this rear radiator. They're Silverstone 120mm dust filters. I'm not exactly sure of the model number, but I'm using Feather Tree Work mid-speed fans on the back here. And as you can see, I've got 2 scythe fan controllers on the front. Basically, there's 2 radiators in this build, and the fans on both of those radiators are being controlled by these 2 fan controllers. So, you know, these Feather Tree Work mid-speeds are quite loud fans, so definitely need to turn those down. But I like to be able to have full control over the fans in my builds, mainly when I'm going to be doing a lot of overclocking, because, you know, during an overclocking and benching session, crank all the fans up, get as much cooling as you can, and then when you're using the system for 24/7 use again, you can crank them all back down again nice and easily. You know, if I wasn't going to be doing that, I obviously would just use like reduction cables, you know, to change the fans down to 7 volt or 5 volt. So I'm using the same dust filters on the inside here, and you might be wondering why I'm using dust filters on the inside of a build, but it's just because with a case like this, dust comes in everywhere. I mean, it can get in through the back there, and you know, with the build I had in the system previously, dust was quite a problem. There's also ventilation up there where dust can get in. So I've got Noctua NFP12s here. These are not the new Noctua fans, they're the older model fans. The radiators that I'm using are Feather exchanges. I've got a 360mm rad in the top there, and there's a 480 on the back. There's a 140mm fan under there, and another 120mm down there. That's an Animax TB Silence, and I think that's just a Corsair fan under there. Now there's a bit of lighting already in the build. We've got LED strips. This is a red one here. We've got a blue one down there, and another blue one down there. I think that's about it for now. So I'm going to now move on to stripping the parts from this build, and yeah, I'm going to be showing you most of this. I'm not sure if I'll time lapse it or just show you the steps, but I've got a video of this build on my channel, so I'll put a link on the screen to that. Make sure you check that out. I'm not going to go into all the specifications of this build now. You can see the Rampage 2 Extreme motherboard, which I'll be ripping out. Also, yeah, the CPU water block I'll be using. It's an EK Supreme HF, and the CPU, and also this pump here. So the rest of it will be going back into the new build that I'll be building back into this case, and that's the build that I'll be doing the water cooling tutorial on. And what I have going back into this case is actually quite exciting. I've got a Rampage 3 Extreme Core i7 980X. It's going to be quite an epic system. Anyway, I've got a lot of work ahead of me, so I'm going to start draining this thing and pulling it apart. Okay, I'm just starting to drain the system now, and I've had a lot of you asking for me to time lapse me, you know, working on my system, so that's what I'm going to do. I'll time lapse the boring parts, and yeah, you can watch all the interesting parts, hopefully. So here we go. Got a couple of quick disconnects here. Coolant's VL3 and quick disconnects in this build. And I'm just going to start undoing them. The VL3 ends, they spill a lot more than the VL4 ends. That's one of the reasons that I like using the VL4 ends. Usually what I should have done is turn this the other way around. You see how anyway, this part is facing downwards. It means it's going to spill a lot more. So I'm just going to wrap this towel around it. Spilled a few mils. I shouldn't have let it go because I put it everywhere. That's that one. Just going to get another one off here, and then I can get rid of the pump, which is the way I designed this. Once the pump's out of the way, then I can drain the system very easily. So that's got that one. Now I've just got to thread the wires for the pump through from the back, and then the pump's out of the way. Alright, so just like you would have seen when I was doing my Singularity Beast 2 build, I'm just putting the other side of a quick disconnect back onto here and draining the system. So it seems to be getting air in there quite easily, but I'm still just going to undo the top of the reservoir, let a bit more in. So that's the reservoir drained. Now I've got to get that out. And out comes the reservoir. Now I have to undo one of the tubes, which should be empty at this point. But just in case, I'll still put a towel up under there. Alright, that's the reservoir out. Now I just need to undo the quick disconnects from the top here, the top of the build. Okay, I'm now just going to compress these quick disconnects with a screwdriver. Unfortunately, I don't have these particular fittings. Like, these are the only ones I have, so I can't get the other side of one of these to compress it. So yeah, I've got to use a screwdriver in this situation. So Matt, do you want to come and hold this container here? And I'll put this one back on so that we can get this all drained in one hit. Alright, here we go. So it's pouring out the bottom at the moment, very fast. This should get the whole loop pretty much drained. We'll probably have a bit stuck in the top 360mm radiator, but once most of it's drained, I'll pull these quick disconnects off up the top here, and I'll just blow the rest of the coolant through. Okay, this other one is on too tight. We're not going to be reusing any of this tubing or coolant, so I never reuse tubing and coolant for that matter. So I'm just going to cut it, and you ready down there, Matt?
Yep.
It's probably going to come pouring out. Well, it might. There we go, they're both off. Here we go. Let's see how much of this coolant we can get out. That'll do. Okay, now most of the system is empty. Just a little bit more dripping out there onto the towel. So I'm just going to pull the rest of the tubes out, and then we'll be able to remove the graphics cards, motherboard, yeah, and pull the system apart. Alright, I went a bit crazy and just smashed the computer to pieces. So there it is, right there in pieces. No, not really, but I decided to get on with things, and I mean, yeah, it was just a matter of pulling all the tubes out anyway, which is mostly done now. I have removed the rear radiator, which is also very easy. The top radiator is also gone, so the roof of the case had to be removed to to remove that top radiator. That's just hanging down there. I've got the fans hanging down there. It's a bit of a mess at the moment. And the graphics cards are out. I'm just about to remove the rest of those cards, pull all the wiring out of the motherboard, and then I'll be removing the motherboard. And then the motherboard is going into the Corsair Obsidian 800D. I'm also going to remove the heatsink and put some new TIM, clean it all up, put new TIM under it, drain it, pull the fittings off it, put new O-rings on them, put them back on, all that. Basically new O-rings on all the fittings that I'm going to be using, cleaning up everything that I'm going to be using, properly draining it, dust cleaning it. Everything is going to be all nice, new and clean before it goes into the other system. So I'll just show you the graphics cards out of the build. I've got them sitting here. So these are Crossfire 5970s, so quad GPUs. It's a pretty powerful GPU setup still in the scheme of things, even though it's a bit outdated now. So this will be going back into the half-X build for the water cooling tutorial that I'm doing coming up. Alright, the fittings pile is just getting bigger and bigger. There's all the stuff that I'm having to clean up, and Matt's got the radiators out the back. He's cleaning all the dust out of them and draining them. Okay, the half-X build is almost completely stripped. We've got everything out of it that we need now. I've just left behind a couple of fan controllers, the power supply and a hard drive. So you'll be seeing this build upcoming in a water cooling tutorial that I'm doing, as I've mentioned. So that's it for that build for now. Now it's time to resurrect the Singularity Beast, although it won't be called the Singularity Beast anymore because I'm passing it on to a mate. Now, these are all the fittings that I've pulled out of both of these builds when I stripped the Singularity Beast and also when I stripped the half-X build. These are the fittings that I got out of them both, although this is actually not all of them because I've put some of them away, and I've also started putting some of them on the motherboard, which I'll talk about in a minute. But yeah, I was just looking at these fittings and thinking of how much money is worth is actually here. Like, these are $10 each, these are 15. These ones are like $15 each. It's just crazy. So the thing is though, these things are really expensive, but they are totally worth it because not only do they look great in the build, work perfectly, never have any problems whatsoever, they last forever. Like, I've just gone and put new O-rings on all of these fittings because, if you look after them, you can reuse them time and time again. And I've polished them all up, got all the finger marks off them, and they just look great still. Even though they're a couple of years old, they've been in these builds for ages. I've actually got a bit of a review on these on my channel, so I'll put a link on the screen, you can check that out. Some of this stuff is not going into this build, I've just got it sitting here, I've got all these Bits Power mod kits for the MCP 655s that were in the Singularity Beast and also in the half-X. Reservoir from the half-X build. So we've got the two different types of Bits Power mod kits here, and I've also got the two back parts of the mod kits here, the silver one and also the black one. I absolutely love these mod kits. I always use them when I'm using these particular pumps. So that's the back that goes on there. I just have to, you can see these two wires have to be pulled out through that little hole, so I actually have to remove the connectors off the end. And then this is the pump here. This will be going into one of these, a Coolant's RP452X2 reservoir. So this reservoir fits dual pumps, it has dual reservoirs, it can be used in a whole bunch of different configurations. You can have one loop with a single pump, one loop with dual pumps, two separate loops. What we're going to be doing is running one loop with a single pump for now, and then I'll upgrade this system again later because my mate lives close by, so we can work on it all the time. Yeah, I'll upgrade it later and put another pump into the reservoir. So yeah, I'll give you a look at that in a minute. Whole bunch of coolants, quick disconnects there. Here's the reservoir. I've actually got a video of this reservoir and also the single bay version on my channel, so I'll put a link on the screen for you to check that out. So as I mentioned, dual pumps, dual reservoirs. You can see there's one on each side there, so you can even use this in a dual loop configuration, although that's not what we're doing. We're just using a single loop, single pump. So the pump is on this side. I've screwed it in. This side, there's just a blanking plate to seal it off, but very easy to pull that out and install the pump. So this is obviously the Rampage 2 Extreme, and this memory, this kit of memory, is actually out of the Singularity Beast, and it's a 12 gig 2000 megahertz. Timings are just there, 9, 10, 9, 2, 7. CR2 I think it is, 1.65 volts kit of Corsair Dominator GT, and the heatsink cooling them is an EK nickel plexi. It's an EK RAM Dominator water block specifically for for Corsair Dominator memory, and the water block on the CPU is an EK Supreme HF nickel plexi. And yeah, I'm going to be using all Bits Power Black Sparkle fittings again in this build. It's what I always use. Tygon 1/2 inch tubing. That should be enough to do this build there. So you can see I've started tubing this up, and it was quite difficult, you know, because you've got 3 water blocks there really close together. And I wasn't sure. I mean, I know I wanted to go CPU first, and then I didn't really care what followed. But yeah, I had to do a bit of playing around here to get this right, because you know, this here and this here, they have to be at the same level. Like, you can't have the one on the memory higher or lower than the other one. Otherwise, you know, the tubing is going to have to bend sharply up. And that even more so goes for this tube here, because there's even less distance between those 2 fittings. Wow, it's heavy. I'm just trying to lift the board up to spin it around. It is incredibly heavy with all those blocks, and I reckon it must be, you know, over 7 kilos, which is crazy. So you can see I had to get them at the same height. They're not quite at the same height though. The one on the right's slightly higher, and that makes it, yeah, difficult to get the tubing on there. And so yeah, getting those to the same height, I had to use a combination of different extension fittings. So you can see I've got a 30mm here, and then there's like a 5mm extension fitting there, and then over here I've got a little dual male to male fitting, and then a multi-transfer coupler, and then I've got the 90-degree single rotary in there. So I've got a single rotary 90-degree, another one, and then another one over here, and then a dual rotary 90-degree there, another dual rotary 90-degree there, and then another single rotary 90-degree there, and all compression fittings. I actually put another 5mm extension fitting underneath that one as well. This Tygon tubing is just so easy to work with. I highly recommend this tubing. It's really soft and bends really easily, but without kinking. It just, you know, when I came to do this, I thought, oh no, 2 fittings that close together, they're going to be a nightmare to get tubing on, because you know what you've got to do is spin them both out this way, push the tubing onto one, and kind of kink it onto the other one. And that can be really difficult with stiff tubing. And you know, this is definitely the best tubing that I have ever used. You know, I use it quite often. It's not the first time I've used it, but out of all the tubing that I use, this is my favorite tubing, because yeah, it bends further than any other tubing that I've used. It's softer, it's easier to cut, it's easier to get into tight spots. Not only that, it looks great. This water block here that I've got, it's pretty much on the North Bridge, is an EK nickel copper block. It's actually a universal chipset block, and this motherboard was designed so that you don't have to remove the entire heatsink off it to water cool it. It by default, you get a heatsink on here where this water block is, and it's got fins on it, and it's just a square heatsink, 4 screws, and it comes off. And then you can easily put another water cooling block in its place, like this EK block. So underneath that is a copper core, and I've just put some thermal paste on it, and you know, it's contacting directly with the copper core underneath. So you can just see the edge of the copper core there on the left, just under there. So that's actually going to be highly effective, because a lot of full cover blocks, the coolant doesn't run all the way through them anyway. And you know, that it's going to be cooling, you know, the metal under here, the copper, and then cooling the south bridge and the north bridge, and then it's got a heat pipe going right up here across the MOSFET. That's about it for now. I'm going to put the motherboard in, and then I'm going to start tubing up the rest of the system. Okay, I've installed the motherboard, and I've also started on the tubing and the wiring and a few other things. Now, I know I've skipped a few steps, but keep in mind this is a build log, not a tutorial, and I am covering, you know, the building of a water cooling system from start to finish in a water cooling tutorial that I'm doing shortly. So yeah, I don't want to cover things twice. So now I'm just going to go around and catch you up on what I've done. So I'd done most of the tubing up on the motherboard before I installed it, which is always a good thing to do. You know, if you can do most of the tubing out, like the tubing on the motherboard outside of the case, it makes things a lot easier. So yeah, I'd already showed you how I tubed up the 3 heat sinks on the motherboard, the CPU memory and north bridge heat sinks. So now you can see I've got another tube just there, which is going to go down to the graphics cards when they're installed. So that's, you know, I've made that too long so that I can trim it down to length, you know, once I've installed those graphics cards and I know what length it needs to be. Also, the other tube that's going to the graphics cards is that one down the bottom there. So that one's also way too long, and I'll just trim that down when I install the cards. It'll probably, you know, it'll go to about there. So that is basically all the tubing is actually done now, except, you know, obviously I still have to trim those down and connect them up when I install the graphics cards, but that's literally a 5-minute job. Whack the cards in and then trim the tubes and connect them up. That's it. The rest of the tubing is done. So yeah, I'll just have a bit of a look at the wiring now. I've done most of the wiring too, actually. You can see the 24-pin motherboard power's in there. I've got some of the fans wired up, like this fan and this fan under here. So one goes to there, another one goes to just there. Front panel is all wired up, all the front panel connectors. I've got temp sensors hanging out here. I'm going to put them around the build soon. There's 3 of them, because on this motherboard there's 3 temp sensors. So the tubing routing, it starts here at the reservoir. Now I've already showed you the reservoir that I'm using, so I'll take you around the front and show you what it looks like from the front shortly. But okay, we've got the outlet just here at the bottom. Okay, so it goes from there. It's a 90-degree single rotary fitting up to the top radiator, and that's just got a straight compression fitting over there. Then we've got a 25 mil extension just there, a 90-degree single rotary fitting. You can see that goes horizontally across there. I've cable tied it in 2 places so it's nice and secure up there, and you know, across the back out of the way of the fans a bit. So then it goes to the rear radiator, can see it connects up there to that quick disconnect, comes back in. I've had to put, you know, little bits of tubing here and here, but I need that flexibility there to be able to angle things. Then it goes to the CPU, and I've got a 90-degree dual rotary here. It comes out of the CPU, 90-degree single rotary to another 90-degree single rotary on that North Bridge block, 30mm extension fitting, and then another 5mm extension fitting and a 90-degree single rotary fitting across to another 90-degree single rotary on the memory, and then out to a dual rotary 90-degree fitting, and then it will go to the graphics cards, which will probably be another dual rotary 90-degree fitting. It'll come out of the graphics cards a 90-degree single rotary, and then quick disconnect here, which is aside from those two quick disconnects up there, this will be the only other quick disconnect in the build. So yeah, this will be the draining point here. It'll just be a matter of, you can see it's the lowest point, there's really nothing below that. You know, everything, the reservoir, you got the radiators above. I mean, the bottom of that radiator will hold coolant, but that's a different matter because you can just easily remove that off the back, tip it upside down and drain it out the quick disconnect. So that's not a problem, but all this here will drain out to here, because what you do, undo that, you know, there'll be all that tubing there, you'll be able to stick it out over the side here, put another quick disconnect back into it and drain it into a container just here. So that will make draining really easy. I'm going to put a fan there, I'm pretty sure. Can't put a fan there because the coolant's adjustable radiator mount prevents it. That does not take a fan in the bottom. The bottom is going to be kind of empty. He won't be putting any hard drives in there for now. So yeah, the bottom here, it just allows for a bit of ventilation, I guess, to this fan here. And he'll probably put some hard drives in there later. All 4 of the hot swap bays will be full of hard drives. So I'll just take you around the front now and around the other side. This is the switch panel that we'll be using in the build. So they're military switches. I'll show you that better later when I actually install it. But basically those 2 military switches will control all of the lighting in the build. I've still got to install some LEDs. And there's a whole bunch of LEDs there. They'll be going in the memory block and the CPU block. Okay, I'm going to have to split this build log into 2 parts. So that sums up part 1 of the build log. Part 2 will follow directly on from part 1. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, like and favorite if you want to see more. Thanks everyone.